Ahoy, etc. This is Extraordinary Adventures Pirates, a game about terrorising merchants all the way from San Sebastian to Trinidad, snapping up treasures and overtaking rival pirate crews on your quest for fame, glory, and victory points. It's easy enough to learn and it trundles along at a pretty decent pace, but is it any good? Pour yourself a measure of grog and I'll tell you. Extraordinary Adventures Pirates is as much a nautical racing game as it is a competitive adventuring one. In the latest offering from Forbidden Games, players control a fleet of 3 pirate ships. These ships race along 3 separate tracks, starting in St. Augustine, Havana, and Gran Granada. All of these tracks converge on Trinidad. The game ends as soon as the first ship reaches the end of the track and makes port in Trinidad, with victory points being dished out to players depending on the position in which they finished. Coming in second, third, or even fourth doesn't necessarily mean you've lost, mind you. As you travel along the waterways of the Caribbean, you can always choose to stop off along the way and engage in a bit of good old-fashioned plunder. Each of the tracks is studded with merchant ships, just idling in the waters and waiting for an unscrupulous pirate to come along and relieve them of their cargo. The cargo is represented by a collection of randomly drawn cubes. Every time you plunder a ship, you also gain yourself a new crew member, which I'll get onto in a bit. So once you've trundled your way along some of the tracks and you've got yourself a nice little collection of cubes, you'll want to put any one of your ships into port, at which point you can dip into your supply of cargo crates in order to buy yourself a treasure like this one, the Panama treasure of Sir Henry Morgan. This is worth 6 victory points at the end of the game. The exact value of each treasure varies depending on how expensive it is to procure. You can see the costs down here at the bottom. So if you're lucky, swift and mean enough, you could find yourself walking away from a port with a tidy 8 victory points, which is certainly no bad thing. After all, being first to Trinidad is all good and well, but there's nothing quite like having a ship's hold bursting with treasure. Like plundering a merchant ship, visiting a port also furnishes you with a fresh crew member, which I will come back to right now, actually. Hopefully, as you can see, there's more than one route to victory in Extraordinary Adventures Pirates, and the seas are yours for the plundering. The tricky part is knowing which ships to prioritise and when, because you've only got a certain number of moves in each turn, and you've got a whole fleet to manage. You see, Extraordinary Adventures Pirates isn't just an exploration game, and it's not just a racing game, it's also a deck building game. When you first start out, you have a deck of 10 cards. These are mostly comprised of useless lubbers, with the occasional card like the able-bodied seaman or the sailing master's mate thrown in. On your turn, you can play up to 3 cards from your hand of 5. Cards can be played either for their numerical value, which determines how many spaces you can move your ship along a track, or they can be played for whatever effect/ability that card might have. You could play the sailor from Santo Domingo for 2 spaces of movement on any track, for example, or you could play it to move 4 on the red track, giving you greater movement at the expense of choice. With 3 ships to manage, a limit to the number of cards you can play on each turn, and, most importantly of all, a bunch of rival pirates in the water, using your turns wisely is really important if you want to get ahead. It also really emphasises the importance of visiting ports and plundering merchant vessels, as these are the only 2 ways to gain more cards and improve your crew, and as any sailor worth their salt will tell you, a bad crew's not going to get very far in life. The cards in the merchant deck are pretty reliable 2s and 3s, offering decent improvement to your crew roster. However, it's in the port deck that the truly able-bodied seamen lie. In ports, you can choose from an offering of 3 face-up cards or take one straight from the top of the deck, and some of these cards are, quite frankly, bonkers. The Pirate Captain allows you to move 4 spaces or take 1 crate from a player when you land on their ship. The card Storms, meanwhile, allows you to move the lead ship back by 10 paces on one of the tracks, which is potentially devastating. The gunner's mate allows you to move forward 5 on one track by moving back 2 on another one. And granted, some of these cards can only be played for their effect once, but either way, drawing them gives you a significant advantage. In addition to these single-use powers, there are also cards that can be played in front of you, like upgrades. For example, there's the first mate from Havana, who will move you an extra 2 spaces on the red track every single turn. I'll get onto how well balanced this game is in due course, but either way, it has to be said, bulking out your crew and putting together a bunch of interesting cards to speed you on your journey is pretty satisfying. It also means the game gathers pace at a rate of knots as it goes on. In the beginning, there's a lot of jostling for position as players start out from port with pretty much identical rubbish decks, but then as they start to snap up those extra crew members, they start travelling further with each go until the game becomes a breathless race to reach the finish line or snap up just one more treasure before it's all over. Interestingly, the gathering pace means that each player will inevitably end up abandoning one track entirely, maybe even 2 of them, focusing on the ship or ships that are most likely to get them a last few victory points before the end of the game. And to be honest, it feels pretty weird to just leave one of your vessels idling while the rest of them charge ahead, but it's kind of an essential tactic if you want to be in with a shot at winning. So, as you can see for yourself, Extraordinary Pirates has a few different things going on at the same time. A bit like a sail that's patched together with a lot of different bits of canvas, but the real question is whether it works and, more importantly, whether it's any fun. And I just noticed that one of my friends, thinking he's funny, has stuck down a Seafall sticker on the board. So that's been there for the entire review. Let's try and get rid of that, shall we? Lovely. I'm pleased to say that Extraordinary Adventures Pirates isn't bad at all. It's extremely easy to learn, it sets a good pace, and it offers up some pretty chilled action with some amusing moments of tension when one player has a particularly good turn and blasts past another one. Improving your crew deck and getting a good engine going is undeniably the best part of the game, but all of its core mechanics are pretty solid. Indeed, Extraordinary Adventures Pirates handles card drafting, victory point chasing, and strategic play in such a simple, straightforward fashion that I'd say this game is ideal for anybody relatively new to tabletop who's looking to expand their horizons a little bit. And that's not to say it isn't fun for the more experienced, mind you, because it is. It's kind of a bit like Merchants and Marauders meets Flamme Rouge, and that's quite fun. It's just worth pointing out that this game in particular is very beginner friendly. It's not without its drawbacks, mind you, but I'll get back to those momentarily. If you're looking for a bit of extra complexity from Extraordinary Adventures Pirates, there is in fact an advanced game mechanic you can add on top of the normal fare. In this mode, each player gets some pirate meeples to place at ports along the 3 tracks. If they come into port with one of their meeples and they make a purchase of a treasure, that meeple goes down on the treasure and its victory points value is doubled at the end of the game. If they don't have sufficient cargo to buy a treasure, they can still pick up a pirate for a victory point at the end. And get this, if you get into a port and there's a rival pirate meeple there, you can kidnap them to score yourself a victory point and deny them their chance to double their money. These little wooden pirates add a really welcome extra layer of strategy to the game, and in my opinion, they're worth having in from game 1. That said, they can make the game a little bit swingy in terms of how many points each player is earning, so you may prefer to leave them out and have the game be a straightforward test of seamanship instead. Either way, this is a fairly elegant board game, if not groundbreaking, but I do have to say, much like a pirate who really likes eating dinner, I have a few reservations. The balance in Extraordinary Adventures Pirates isn't perfect. The point swing can be fairly massive, and sometimes players will be left feeling like they never really got a chance to get going before they were left in the dust, or the water, I suppose. While the players who don't go first are compensated in the form of a free cargo crate or an extra crew member at the start of the game, being the first person to take a turn really is an enormous boon, especially since in games with higher player numbers, arriving first in Trinidad gives you loads of points. In a 6-player game, it's worth 21. You really do have to fight for position, in other words, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a little bit at odds with the breezy, beginner-friendly presentation of the game. And to be fair to this one, it is worth reminding you that this game is, in part, a deck builder, and, as is the case with pretty much any game where players are tasked with getting an engine going, the rich will get richer. There can be a real gap in terms of how well players do, in other words, which is partly down to the nature of the game's card mechanics, but can still be a bit frustrating if you're way behind and you're just waiting for the game to wrap up. One last issue I had with this game, and that is with part of the artwork. The first time I played this game, one of the players around the table was Asian. I watched her pick up a card at one point and examine it, and her face fell, and seeing the card for myself, I can kind of understand why she was put off by Extraordinary Adventures Pirates. Its depiction of Asian people comes pretty darn close to a racist stereotype, and while I doubt there was any malicious intent behind this drawing, it still took some of the sheen off. So yeah, Extraordinary Adventures Pirates isn't perfect. Despite its foibles, however, there's a lot to like here. It's a good game for beginners looking to expand their horizons. I can easily see people playing this one and then moving on to other games like, as I said, Flamme Rouge or Merchants and Marauders or something like Dominion. In short, this is a game trying a few different things at once. And sure, there are games out there that do the same mechanics better, but Extraordinary Adventures Pirates ties them all together in a vibrant package that's easy to pick up and competitive without being overly complex. Is it my favourite pirate game? No, it's not, because I love Merchants and Marauders. Is it better than Seafall? Yes, it is, because most things are.